All right, so our worst 10 of the year. Look, on my number 10 spot is going to be a little bit of a hot take because I think this movie might be on some people's best 10 of the year list. But for me, it was X. I know a lot of people love this film and that's great. And it's almost unfair of me to put it on because I walked out of the movie like a little more than halfway through it. I just found it so dry and so dull and so boring. And I love filthy in movies. Bring on the filthy. But man, it had a lot of filthy in it and yet I still found it just oppressively boring. And again, I understand it's a little unfair to do that because I didn't watch the whole movie. I acknowledge it. I totally do. But it was one of my least pleasant experiences at the movies this year, so X is my number 10 worst film of the year. At number 9 for worst film of the year, there will be no hot take, no controversy, except for the fact that I actually thought this one might end up being pretty good, and it wasn't. It was Me Time. Mark Wahlberg, Kevin Hart, I really like both of these individuals. The trailer looked like it had some promise, but it commits the ultimate sin of a comedy. You can do a lot of things wrong in comedy, but if you're not funny, that kills you. And this movie was just painfully not funny. And you get 2 stars who I like very, very much, and I found both of them just kind of annoying in the film. So yeah, Me Time, number 9 worst movie. At number 8 is maybe my biggest disappointment of the year because I actually thought at first this movie might have had some Oscar possibilities to it, but it's Don't Worry, Darling. This movie had everything going for it. You had a director who was like at the top of her game and she's like the hottest thing out there right now, Olivia Wilde, having done Booksmart, and I love that movie so much. You have an incredible cast, you have a really interesting looking kind of mystery thing, and everything was so, again, I'm gonna use the word oppressive. It's oppressively dull. And it makes no sense. And they bring up questions that they just never get around to answering. And the ones that they do answer, you're going, really? That's what that was? With a twist at the end that is one of the most nonsensical, stupidest twists I've ever seen. That, a good twist at the end of a movie makes you look back at the whole movie and go, wow, it adds more depth to the movie when the twist is revealed. This one happens and you're like, really? Really? That's what we sat through all this for? Again, just a huge missed opportunity for one of the most exciting new directors out there right now. But yeah, to me, it was just awful, awful, awful. Don't Worry, Darling takes my number 8 worst film of the year. At number 7 is a movie I thought had some good potential, even though everybody else said it would be terrible. I'm like, no, I got some belief in this. And it's the remake of Firestarter. Now, look, you take a movie with Zac Efron, and I'm kind of predisposed. I really like Zac Efron a lot, so I'm predisposed to liking a lot of his stuff. And I think the basic idea of Firestarter is a cool one in and of itself. And so I thought a modern retake of it could be done really well. But instead, it just felt like it took all the things that worked with the first one and flattened it out. And then all the things that didn't work about the first one and heightened those. And at its worst, many times it just feels like a bad X-Men Origins kind of movie. The characters, they never got you attached to the characters. Like with Drew Barrymore in the original, I know not everybody loves the original, but Drew Barrymore, you start to root for the kid, and just didn't happen here. Firestarter's my number 7 worst film of the year. At number 6, and ooh, this pains me to say it, it's not Guillermo del Toro's, it's Disney and Tom Hanks's Pinocchio. Look, Tom Hanks is America's dad, and it always feels like I'm breaking some kind of law by putting a Tom Hanks movie on a worst film of the year list. But everything that you could do wrong with a telling of Pinocchio, they did. It was never fun. It never got you emotionally invested. Every kind of new thing they tried to introduce just didn't work. And even some classical things that they tried didn't work either. And it's weird because I'm not a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio either, to be honest with you. Like I like it, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But you look at Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio and it nails some of those elements like beautifully. And then you look over at the Disney Pinocchio and it just misses. So yeah, Pinocchio unfortunately ends up on my worst films of the year list. At number 5, and now we're getting into the really, 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 really awful films, but is Michael Bay's Ambulance. And look, I know this movie has its fans and all films subjective, and that's great, but I don't get it. And listen, I'm actually a Michael Bay defender. I don't like all of his movies, but I think I appreciate him and his stylings more than I think maybe most people do. So I'm a Michael Bay defender. This movie's awful. The premise is actually pretty interesting. You got Jake Gyllenhaal, Yahya Abdul-Mateen. I mean, a good supporting cast too in there. But this movie, I said it in my out of theater reaction was, this movie could have been renamed Michael Bay Gets a Drone and Wants to Show It Off. Most of the decisions the characters make in this make absolutely no sense. There are massive, massive logic gaps that all you had to do was be in the edit bay for 2 seconds and go, oh, we got a problem here. It's just a completely unsatisfying ending. It was all gimmick from start to finish. It was just nonsensical. I remember I watched it with our own Aaron Cummings, and I remember sitting there and like half of the movie I was just throwing my head back going, oh my God, are you really, like, it's so awful. It is a terrible movie. Ambulance, my number 5 worst film of the year. All right, my number 4 worst film of the year has got to be Halloween Ends. Now look, I admit, I have never been a fan of the Halloween franchise. I'm one of those rare people that doesn't even really think the first one's all that great. But I think it was 2018 when they came out with the new series of Halloween, right? It was amazing. It was the first Halloween film that I truly, truly loved. Man, they made the worst one yet. I mean, it's a Mike Myers movie that isn't even really about Mike Myers. I mean, the marketing all said, ooh, it's Michael and the big final showdown and all this kind of stuff, but it's not. It's really not. And I understand they try to create a legacy for Mike Myers in this, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, I remember finishing watching and going, what the hell was that? It was just completely awful, completely terrible. A really sad way to end this series, this part of the franchise, especially when they started it off so well. But yeah, for me, Halloween Ends, number 4 worst film of the year. At number 3, a movie I think we all knew was going to be bad, except for maybe Ray Ora, who thought maybe it had the chance to be the greatest film of all time, Moonfall. Now look, if you're like me, none of us walked into Moonfall even remotely expecting something that was going to win Oscars or anything like that. But just how dumb this movie was something I was not prepared for. There's nothing worse than a filmmaker thinking they're doing something really profound, but it's really just awful and shticky and just terrible. And that's what the ending of this was. But hey, it wasn't a departure from anything else. Again, none of the movie made sense. The science of it was completely off, but that's not the most important thing. It's just a really bad movie. Didn't care about any of the characters. Like there was nothing at the end to root for. And its little twist about how the whole problem was happening was just nonsense and took everything away. It absolutely would have worked better just as a natural disaster movie. But yeah, unfortunately for Ray, sorry Ray, Moonfall, number 3 worst film of the year. All right, my number 2 worst film of the year, it's another one of those movies that I actually thought was going to be really good. I believed in Morbius. I thought the trailers looked great. I liked the people that got involved with the film. You had an Academy Award winner sitting up there to take up the lead role in Jared Leto. I thought the trailers were really solid and very exciting. And I love the Venom film. So I love what Sony has done with these Spider-Man verse characters, because I love the Venom films. So I was so excited about Morbius. And while there are a few redeeming things about Morbius, it was just a complete missed opportunity. I think that's what goes through our minds a lot when we're watching. It's like, well, that could have been cool, but it's not. And that could have been cool, but it's not. And just listen to Matt Smith talk about his involvement. He goes, I honestly didn't even know what movie we were making. I mean, it's just, and that's it. And reflects us because I'm watching this movie and I don't even know what movie I'm watching. And then they try to save it with some profound post-credit scene, which is really the worst post-credit scene in any comic book movie history. A massively missed opportunity, a big swing and a miss for Sony on this one. Morbius, my number 2 worst film of the year. And my number 1 worst film of the year breaks my heart because Joe Coy is my absolute favorite comedian in the world. I think he's the funniest man alive. I love Joe Coy. And so when I found out that he was doing this movie Easter Sunday, that was going to integrate a lot of his greatest comedy about talking about his family and his Filipino culture, and I'm married into a Filipino family myself. So, I mean, I had all the highest hopes in the world. I mentioned it earlier, if you're a comedy, the worst thing you can do is just not be funny. And this movie just is not funny at all. It made no sense. I understand what they were going for, but it was just so boring. After 20 minutes of the movie, I realized I kept looking at my watch, like how much longer before this thing, mercifully ends so I can get out of here. And it's, again, for me, that breaks my heart because I love Joe Coy. If by some miracle, Joe Coy, you're watching, you're the best, man. I love you. But this movie hurt. And so, yeah, Easter Sunday is my worst film of the year.